Hello, listeners, and welcome to Season 2 of the Community Exchange Podcast. I'm Matthew Scott Goldstein, better known as MSG in the industry. On this podcast, I'm talking to the visionaries building the media ecosystem of the future. Together, we cover the challenges, the opportunities, and what's next for our industry. As always, the Community Exchange Podcast is brought to you by OpenWeb, the company building a safer, fairer, and more trustworthy internet. Now, we have a great conversation for you. Today, I am joined by Amanda Martin, the CRO of Mediavine. Mediavine is a leading programmatic ad monetization partner helping independent publishers build sustainable businesses. Additionally, Amanda has a background in research and operations, sort of like me, which I love and is interesting for a newly minted CRO. Great to have you in the studio today, Amanda. Now, before we talk about Mediavine, okay, I really want to talk about Goodway Group, where you were there for 7.5 years. And Goodway, as people may or may not know, is a digital marketing agency that has been remote for the last 15 plus years. And it's over 500 people in there. So it's a big ass company. So let's start talking about Goodway. But before we start talking about Goodway, you and I were talking before. You started in sales, and then you moved into research and ops, and now back to sales. Can we do a little bit of that origin story?
Yeah, sure. I would like to say there was a master plan in all of it, but it was kind of feeling my way through the industry and learning the things I needed to learn. I started in sales. I did it successfully across 2 companies for 5 or 6 years. And then I really just wanted to understand how everything worked. It was like the dawn of programmatic. It was ad network time. I wanted to understand what was actually happening.
So you were selling and then handing it over to someone else, yes, and they were doing all the work. You're like,
yeah, I want to
understand how the work gets done.
I want to understand how the cake gets made. I need to understand it. So I switched to operations, which is a bold move to leave a sales career to go to operations.
A lot of money in sales.
Not as much money in operations. Luckily, that has changed over time. They've balanced out a little bit better. But I got to really get my sea legs underneath me. And then I just started taking really interesting opportunities. So got brought into Lynn Media, where I started doing research and analytics
Lynn Media,
for them.
TV stations, right?
Yep. All, local TV stations, owned about 23 at the time that I joined them. They had a digital footprint as well. And I started by putting, code on page and tracking all the different KPIs we needed for our websites. Then that soon turned into more like analysis of potential acquisition targets.
And you and I are talking about Excel.
Yeah, tons of Excel work.
Pivot tables.
I learned
And I will
SQL.
say it now on this podcast.
Yeah.
I am better at Excel pivot tables than anyone in the industry. And we will have a podcast bake-off one day. Go ahead. Right, Mitch? Is that good? Sure. That's producer Mitch over there.
Yeah, I think, honestly, Excel's like my happy place.
Same with me.
Everything I do, I need to bring it back to numbers. It needs to make sense. The math needs to work. And so then I just started learning a lot of different areas. I learned corporate development. And then Goodway Group called.
You said who from Goodway?
Jay called me.
Jay's the boss. Everybody knows Jay,
Yep.
the boss of Goodway Group.
Jay called
and he
me.
lives in
Texas.
And you live in
Rhode Island.
And he said, Amanda?
He said, I have an opportunity for you. And I said, I've never heard of Goodway Group and I'm not moving. And he was like, we're 100% remote. And I like Rhode Island. And I was like, okay, that sounds like an interesting...
But how many companies have been 100% remote since their entirety from 15 years
Goodway
ago,
was
right?
one of
The
very
first.
few, and definitely maybe one of the first agencies or ad tech companies that was remote. Obviously, COVID brought a lot more people into the remote workspace or the hybrid workspace, and worked there, did strategy, did partnerships, did corporate development.
Wait, so then you sort of moved into like a little bit of the sales role, right?
Yep, just started realizing that everyone sells. And every single time I worked with a sales leader, they would always be like, you're in sales, right? Like, you can say you're in partnerships, you can say you're in corp dev, everyone's selling. And so when
and you're good at it, right?
Yeah, I don't.
Are you selling me right now?
I'm always selling. But when Mediavine called, it was a really interesting opportunity. I'd been on the buy side for 7.5 years. I had never experienced the sell side programmatically, and really thought there was an opportunity. Publishers don't have the same level of voice as the buy side did, and I gained a very good kind of thought leadership voice following on that side, and thought it would be valuable to bring that to the sell side. And I just really liked that they represented independent content creators and, smaller publishers.
Wait, so going back to Goodway, right?
Yeah.
So at Goodway, were you also pitching marketers to use your services?
Yes.
And how was that?
It was
Like,
exhilarating.
were you getting the RFPs?
We were getting the RFPs. We were putting together the pitch decks. I had different roles throughout my 7.5 years. But when something big came in the door, in every agency, all hands on deck when big opportunities come in the door. I ran their Center of Excellence team, which had all of our specialists of all our different areas. And so that's really where I overlapped with the pitch team the most. And it was exhilarating, but you would go from a remote work environment where you would curate this idea and then you would go in person and pitch it. So it was very much like a colliding of two worlds.
Did you get together once a year, twice a year, all 500 people or so?
Yep. That's a unique thing for both Mediavine and Goodway is that they both have all hands.
Because Mediavine's remote also.
Yes, 100%
So for the past 8-9 years, you've been living in Rhode Island, commuting to New York City because you have to.
Yeah.
But remote companies.
Yep, remote companies. I'm always on the road anyway, so I'm never home to begin with. So if I was here or if I was in Rhode Island, it feels the same. But yeah, so we worked from home and got used to that. And then everyone started working from home during COVID and realized, oh, you actually work all day. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I do.
Okay. So going back to Goodway, who were some of the biggest clients and what categories were they in?
So Goodway was extremely diverse. They represented both brands directly and agencies who represented brands.
Oh, so you were like the outsource of the big holding company to
holding companies and independent agencies as well. Folks that didn't have maybe programmatic arms, big in auto, big in retail, and then really just diversified across the board, thousands of clients. And so we took their programmatic piece of the equation and ran it. And it was really exciting. But working across such a diverse spread of clients really made it interesting.
And did all the clients have different KPIs for ROAS? Can you talk about, because I'm always fascinated about that, about how are they looking at if this was actually successful?
Yeah, I mean, no two companies are the same. I think the baseline is how much can they actually physically track on their own. So the more they can track on their own, the more specific their KPIs get to business outcomes. But if you get into the CPG space where they don't have the connection to the purchase, there's a lot more inferred media metrics that they're following.
Is it all MMM?
A lot of MMM, a lot of performance based, even to this day, I hate to say it, but click based,
Wait, they're still doing it.
Oh, CTR is still alive and well.
Oh, that just hurts so much. That hurts so much.
It hurts so much. It can be an indication, but it really shouldn't be.
A driver. Already.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a driver.
Yes.
I think the one thing that's been interesting over the past few years is with the concern of cookies going away and it going away in certain browsers, is that companies started to think about what adjacent signals do they have. And so return on ad spend is only getting more and more exciting in the sense of it's actually tied to business. You can never talk to a CFO about click-through rate. They don't care. And the CMO doesn't care either. But you can talk to them about how much product you're pushing, how much lift you're providing in a market versus a market you're not in. So
right. So at Goodway, when you were going to the getting an RFP and then turning around and the 7 of you would all show up in Des Moines, Iowa or Chicago, whatever, were you then responding to the RFP to the CMO or the CFO? Did it change? Have you seen? I've heard that the CFO is getting much more involved now in marketing dollars.
Yeah, I think especially where performance is involved or where growth marketing is involved, the CFO is playing a much larger role in that discussion. Even a chief operations officer is playing a bigger role because it funnels into all of their systems and all of their work. The CMO is definitely still there, but when it comes to performance campaigns, I feel like the CFO is actually tracking the dollars far more closely.
And I feel like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your metrics say or what MMM says. If sales went up for the company overall during that time period, then it's a good thing.
Yeah, budgets are definitely still dictated by like overall business outcomes. I mean, you can have a killer KPI, and if sales are down, it doesn't translate. It doesn't matter.
Okay, so Goodway, you left, and then you left a year and a half ago.
Yep.
To go from Goodway to
Mediavine.
And how did that transition happen?
That transition happened like all good ad tech stories, which is just relationships and
Because you're a salesperson.
because I'm a salesperson.
Okay, how many LinkedIn connections do you have? Do you know?
Thousands. I don't even know the
I
number.
have 7,600.
Yeah, I don't think I'm that high, but I'm also
so now
pretty picky on who I accept.
Oh, why do I accept everyone?
I have some thresholds of
You're better than me.
mutual overlap
Okay.
That I connect. But or if you have a really good note, if you send me a good note, then I can consider a connection.
Okay, everyone listening, send Amanda a really good note.
Yeah, just the blind connection on LinkedIn when you have like 3 overlapping mutual connections.
I just do the blind connection. Like once someone sends me an email, then I get to LinkedIn right away to find out the person. That's what I rarely do random people.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so your connections got you to Jay.
Connections got me to Jay. And
Jay's now the CEO.
Yep, Jay's the CEO of Goodway Group. He was president and now CEO. And then connections got me to Eric and the co-founder team at Mediavine. And they recognize that having buy-side experience would be very valuable to the sell side.
And I would say overall, they are 100% correct. I would say any publisher or publisher partner will hire someone who has marketing buy-side experience. It's a win overall.
Yeah, I mean, I was even amazed at some of the assumptions each side had. Like, I came in the door and some of the things that folks would say, well, buyers do this.
At Media, they would say at Mediavine, buyers do A, B, and C. You're like, no, I just worked for them for 7.5 years. You are wrong.
Yeah, and vice versa.
Is there an example you can give me on that?
I think one of the biggest examples was the disconnect between understanding what content signals matter to the buy side versus what audience signals matter to the buy side. So we represent over 10,000 publishers. They're all fantastic content creators. They write great stories. They write great recipes. They write great travel blogs. But if you're thinking about why big advertisers are buying you, it's because their target audience is on your site, not necessarily because one article was just like game stopper.
And these 10,000 publishers, which is a enormous number,
it's a huge number, yeah.
Like, is it mostly just one person writing for an individual website? Like, how's it break out?
So depending on the size, it goes from one-man shops all the way up to like fully formed teams. I mean, we have some publishers who have created really great like business entities around what started as like a one-person show. I think that's where you kind of see that acceleration with traffic adoption, with, when they land with a really great audience, they build into small businesses. And that's really interesting to have helped so many of them get to that
And
place.
what services do you give them today? Like, and it feels like the services keep on growing and growing, correct?
Yeah. So I always like to say we're a monetization partner. So we started as an ad monetization partner. We now are looking at like, how do we drive revenue for these businesses so that they can stay in business, so they can create great content. So the OpenWeb isn't, 20 websites, that it's more, but it's not a lot of the sites we don't want to find. And so for us, we exclusively do their entire ad stack. So their ads.txt file is 100% us. Every ad slot is provided by us. They obviously can control how much they want to put on or how little they want to put on.
And it's your instance of GAM.
It's our instance of GAM. Yep. And what we do then is we connect to all the supply pipes. We create the demand funnel. We then have a sales team that's out talking to the advertisers to...
And everybody's favorite word is you're curating, right?
Yep, we're curating.
Okay.
They're curating content. We're curating demand
Okay.
On their behalf. And then that extends into a plethora of other things. It's getting them the right partnerships to help them drive, more source traffic. I think that's been one of the biggest pain points of the past 6 months, is that publishers are not 100% in control of how folks find them. And others.
Most of these sites you deal with, the 10,000, most of the traffic comes from Google, I assume?
Google,
like looking for
social.
recipe. Okay.
Yeah, they have loyal followers, but then they also have the, I'm looking for the right recipe for Thanksgiving. And so I find one of our sites, and then you become kind of a loyal user of those sites, because when you make, a great dinner for Thanksgiving, and then you like, oh, I went to that site before, I'll go back to that site and find something new. But search is a major role in any publisher's source traffic game plan.
Yeah, I was doing some research before, and I think I came up with like 10 or 15 sites in the entire U.S. internet that got over 50% of their traffic direct, and everything. Every other site was majority search.
Yeah, the majority of traffic is just coming from a source where someone went looking for it somewhere else. So whether it be on TikTok or Pinterest or Google search or Bing, you go somewhere, wherever you like to go, to type in what you're looking for, even if you know the domain. I find myself sometimes typing a domain and I'm like, oh, I just Googled the domain I want to go to.
We all do that.
We all do it. So so they're dependent upon those sources and the work that they have to put in to ensure that they get the traffic from those sources.
And then how often are you interacting with these 10,000? Again, I'm just blown away by 10,000, because how many people do you have helping and maintaining these 10,000? Or I'm sure there's the 80-20 rule in some way too, right? Or
we definitely have more volume in some of our sites, but all of our sites have the same audience opportunity for buyers. And so whether you find your audience on a site that has millions of unique users or has thousands of unique users, they're the right audience for you. So you want to find them there. I think the one thing that's interesting is that we have a huge support and success team that works directly with our publisher set. And when I came in the door, I obviously had this buy-side experience. Yeah. And so I leaned into the advertising side, because that was an area that the company didn't have a ton of experience from being on it. But now I'm really leaning into the publisher side, and it's so interesting and so rewarding. Just great stories, great people behind the content. It just makes you feel really good about getting up and doing your job in the morning. Sometimes ad tech can feel a little machine oriented, but
do you bring the publishers, you call them creators, do you bring the creators together all the time?
We bring them together. We do on the move stuff, which is like little pop-ups, because they're spread out also. They're all over the world. So
mostly US, all over the world.
Yeah. So we're predominantly US based, but our publishers can be sitting anywhere. And we have traffic outside the US as well, but US is definitely like our dominant market. But our publishers sit in the UK, they sit in Wales, they sit in France, they sit in Germany.
And do you churn? Does a couple hundred come in and a couple hundred leave? Do you get rid of them? And I guess one of the things I'm asking is, like, I'm trying to write an article about killing the crap on the internet.
Yeah.
Because I think there's so much crap publishers. A little publisher can get a domain, get some Gen AI content, and get up and going. Like, how do you curate to make sure there's no crap of your 10,000?
So one thing that we're really proud of is that there is like an actual human vetting process of sites getting into our network. And so that means that, unlike other smaller networks where you just kind of auto log in and start monetizing on day one, we are actually looking at sites that hit the Mediavine threshold to ensure that they are the quality that we want. Generative AI is creating a whole plethora of new things that we have to look for. And so we've actually partnered with a few kind of research firms that look at different signals like content quality.
Oh, to make sure the content of your creators is actually authentic.
Are they using a templated site?
Okay.
Where does their traffic come from? Is it coming from bot traffic? Is it coming from bad networks that have been identified in the ecosystem? So it definitely has become more challenging to ensure, but it's a challenge that, like, that's our job. Our job is to curate brand safe inventory for the buy side to support these publishers. And the publishers don't want us supporting non-human curated content either, because that means that they're losing monetization value to a computer. And so while AI can be a great tool to assist in content creation, it can't be the replacement of humans in content creation.
So Eric, your CEO, wrote an article in May on Ad Exchanger about publishers should not worry about third-party cookie deprecation. They should worry about
generative AI.
Okay. Can we talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think there's kind of two threats. There's the replacement of human content with AI content, and then there's the replacement of search results with AI results. And so every time you're on Google and you don't have to click through to the site that gave you the answer, that person giving you the answer isn't getting paid for the answer.
Right, and you hear different stories about Google. The 0 clicks keeps on going up from 50 to 60% of Google just basically answering every question. I remember talking to someone at a weather site, and they said, we had this 10 years ago, because 10 years ago...
They sourced the weather traffic from them. And
correct, and that's okay. Everything was disintermediated then. So,
Yep.
But it's happening now to publishers, but they were used to it. They happened to them 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think the result, though, is that the content can't be completely outsourced, so they can't completely replace it. They need it to still get curated by someone. I think they'll have to walk a fine line between the experience a user wants and what generative AI can give you. I don't know how you feel, but I don't think the search results are improving. I actually think they're getting harder to find the thing you're looking for, not easier to find it. If I'm looking for a quick answer, yes, sure, AI will tell me, Fahrenheit to Celsius very easily, but when I'm looking for like a recipe, I need to have a little more context or a little more knowledge behind the
Right.
answer.
So it's okay if Google gives you the simple answer. When you want something more complicated,
Yep.
you need to dig and actually go to the origin site to find out what's really going on.
Which I think just changes the publisher game. I think there was a lot of kind of search engine optimization content creation happening across websites of all sizes. Create content that gets searched for. Now,
Well, first it was create content that gets Facebook to drive you
Yep.
traffic.
Yep.
Right. And then Facebook just died. And now it's always been Google.
Yep.
Bing never did it. Nothing else has ever done it. There's all these other Gen AI companies out there, Perplexity, trying to re-energize the search marketplace or the way content's created or consumed. Something is going to hopefully be figured out one day.
Yeah, exactly. I think our content creators are just learning that the depth and value of the content kind of gets reprioritized now, because that is what AI cannot replace. I think if you read AI text, it's pretty different than human content.
Do your content creators also take the content they have and then update it and refresh it every 3 or 6 months to make sure it still feels new?
I think that's even more important now. I think the freshness of content, I think previously content kind of could stay out there forever and ever, and I just don't know that benefits publishers anymore. So I think it's a lot more housekeeping now for publishers, which means a lot more work, which makes it difficult if their monetization of their site has decreased because their traffic source has decreased, but the effort to support that has increased. It's a tightrope walk that they're walking now, not when third-party cookies go away.
So over the past couple of years, there's only sort of one real news and information website that was started and then died, The Messenger.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I find it hard to believe that another news and information site is going to evolve and just come into the zeitgeist today.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't see that happening anymore with specifically, I know you're not news and information, but specifically about news and information.
Yeah, I think there are different, we sit more in the lifestyle space. So I think we sit a little bit outside of the kind of like standardized news story that goes across a lot of different publications. But I think there's also similar trends. I don't think that there's anything popping up that is a saving grace for everyone. I think it's honestly the effort that content creators put in. And then our job is to express that effort and that work and that value to the buy side so that they continue to support it. Like, that's the most important thing.
And traditionally, the CPMs of the lifestyle sites are much higher than news and information, especially when they go from lifestyle to intent-based content.
Yes, for sure. I think lifestyle has been a safe haven for advertisers, and therefore it demands a higher CPM.
And then ad per paid, ad density. Do you probably talk to your curators about that as well all the time, right?
Yeah, so we set up kind of your preferences that meet the expectations of the buy side. What I think is interesting is Made for Advertising kind of was like, love our headlines in ad tech. We love to like hook onto a topic for a really long period of time, but Made for Advertising has kind of morphed into ad experience, which I actually really like.
I personally think that every single website out there is MFA.
Well, it is. Everyone is
right.
trying to advertise.
Like 25 years ago, I worked at Nickelodeon, and the mantra was, we are building an audience to sell to advertisers. That's what they did.
Yeah. I think there's arbitrage that happens. Like that's
Yes.
different. But I think ad experience, having come from the buy side, I often look at even our ad experience with a very objective.
And how do
could we make this better?
How do you define ad experience? Like, is there 4 ads per page, and if the 5th ad it's bad?
I think it's
Because if I go to
yeah.
Sincera and I look at ad density, and you add Taboola or Outbrain at the bottom,
yeah.
some of those publishers hit 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 plus, I believe, on desktop.
What I think is interesting is mid to long tail sites tend to get the assumption that they have more ads than like large publications have. And if you look at ad density ratings, large publications tend to put more ads on a page than mid to long tail sites.
Is that because they have to feed the machine that's making all the content? And
yeah,
it's
I mean,
expensive?
if you're publicly traded and you have to drive yields quarter after quarter, more ads, more ads, more ads. I mean, that was kind of like the go-to move. I think we sit in a unique spot because we're independent, and so we have that flexibility. But our publishers really are concerned about their reader experience, which means if it's a good reader experience, then it's a good advertising experience. The two balance out.
And how do you define how do you help your creators define whether or not an article or a post they create is successful? Like, is there a metric that you use? Is there something what is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think they look obviously at traffic is overall a metric. RPM is really like what publishers live and die by. So, we think about CPM on the buy side. They think about RPM. So they're looking at like the page value
Right.
that a post.
So 250
drives.
CPM, 4 ads, $10 RPM.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that.
And it's funny, the metric that I started looking at the most to figure out whether a post is successful is scroll depth.
Yeah, that's great. Or time spent.
Well, time spent, yes and no, because sometimes I feel like someone goes to a page and they leave
Leaves
the
it
page.
open, yeah.
So you don't really know. But scroll depth, if an article is 800 words and they get to 600 or 700, that's good.
Yeah.
Right. And if an article is 2,000 words, they get to 2,000, that's great. But scroll depth to me feels like it's such a great metric, assuming you know where the bottom is before Taboola and everything else and Outbrain kick in.
Yeah, I think an interesting metric that's popping up more and more is like attention metrics. And I think it's interesting because I don't know how much the buy side will adopt it as like a campaign.
And you're talking
success metric.
specifically about, is it Adelaide?
Adelaide is an example.
There's
a few, yeah, but I think it's a really good signal of what to buy.
Yeah, I just don't know what it means. It's like
Yeah.
they're doing some eye tracking. Like, to me, it's like, I didn't know what that really meant. It was hard to get.
Yeah, I think I think we've always kind of tried to do proxies. I think viewability was a proxy for attention. But a lot of our metrics just become table stakes over time. Once we standardize them, everyone expects you to hit a 70% viewability
But in some ways,
rating.
there's just too many KPIs out there.
Yeah.
For a publisher to deal with, and they sometimes offset each other, and it just becomes an impossible task.
I think the uniqueness that I've found on both the buy side and the sell side is at Goodway, we served a ton of different verticals. At Mediavine, we serve a ton of different verticals, and every vertical has different KPIs. I mean, CPG clients care about one thing versus an automotive client versus a travel client versus a performance-based growth campaign. So publishers have to be everything to everyone, which is extremely challenging. I think looking back on
that's why they have companies like you helping them. Otherwise, think where they'd be without you.
We look to bring them together, increase their scale together so that they can be bigger together, because no advertiser can speak to every publisher that's on the internet. It's even hard to talk to the top 100 publishers. So we really feel like we bring value because we bring that scale and that quality and that brand safety, but you only have to talk to one conduit as opposed to 10,000.
Okay. I'd be remiss if I didn't jump into Privacy Sandbox.
Sure.
Let's talk about that for a couple
Sure.
minutes. So you were at one of my dinners.
Yes,
OpenWeb
love your dinners.
square table dinners.
Yes, fantastic.
Right. One conversation we try to have.
Yeah.
And who was at your dinner? I know JR is always there.
JR was there. Kasali was there. I
You're talking some of the smartest people in
got
the
to
industry.
sit next to you. It was great. No, I love those dinners. I love when you can get a bunch of really smart industry people in a room and actually talk about one thing at a time, as opposed to like just disparate conversations and then no one had the same experience.
I hate the small talk.
You're like, let's just get into it.
Let's just get to it. And I like ending a meal at 8:45 sharp because I know people have to get home.
I also enjoyed that part.
Right.
Too.
Everyone loves that. Let's go back to Privacy Sandbox.
Yep.
So when is it going to happen?
Great question.
Like, it feels like it keeps on getting pushed back a little more and more all the time.
I feel like...
And does it matter?
I think it matters. And the reason why I think it matters is because you have to pay attention to anything that Google's doing. I just don't think you can pretend it doesn't matter. It's also our job to make sure we know about everything that matters for our publishers so they don't have to worry about it. I think Privacy Sandbox is going to be a thing. I think it has a lot that needs to be addressed for it to be that thing. And I think the CMA, I'm sure at this point, is not excited that they bit off this
Yeah, be careful what you wish for. It might come true.
It might come true. But I think that direction will be indicative of the direction of Privacy Sandbox. But like everything that Google does, they iterate quickly. So anything that is one way today could be something completely different in the future, which is why I give it credence, but I also do not have the same level of engineering commitment to it because it is a to be determined situation right now.
I also look at what's the alternative. If the alternative is cookies go away, just like what Safari did, it's a disaster for publishers. Potentially.
I want to encourage Chrome to continue to build a solution that supports advertising. I do not want them to close the door and say...
And I fundamentally believe that's what they are trying to do. I've spoken to so many people there.
I really like the Privacy Sandbox team.
I think they're amazing. I was blown away.
They are very... even if they can't do anything with the feedback that they're collecting, like they listen, they hear. I think they're between a rock and a hard place as well. Like they have to wait for the CMA as well as we do. I think this report will be very interesting to see where it pushes Privacy Sandbox in that direction. I think Privacy Sandbox is waiting. I think they're like, okay, give us our grade and tell us.
Well, I also think like everyone looks at the data and that at a 1% threshold right now, it's kind of meaningless until.
Yeah, I will say I'm very hesitant to jump on the like predictions of what's going to happen with the 1%. I just don't think it's indicative of the buy side community really showing their hand of what they're going to do with it. I think I would love for more than 1%. I would love for 10%. I would love.
Well,
for
some people say get to 50 sooner than skip 10, get to 50, because at 50 at least then you have a better sense and more advertisers would feel like they have to participate.
I think at this point, as a publisher, Q1 seems like a really great time to look at making adjustments, but they're not going to be ready for Q1. So it's not going to happen then.
Oh, I forgot. My favorite thing about my square table dinners that OpenWeb and Nadav and Max help out with is meeting new people.
Yes.
Because every time I try to invite 4 or 5 new people, the majority, it always works. Sometimes, but it's just so nice meeting new people. And you and I met there.
For the first time,
like 3 months ago, 2 months ago. And now we're here doing this. And it's just so nice meeting new people to have them in your world.
I think sometimes we forget how expansive our industry is because we have pretty close-knit groups. My group overlaps with your group, but I always love just finding new people that like have different opinions and perspectives. And I love a dinner where you can disagree with each other. It's one of my
any dinner that
favorites.
JR is there, who I love dearly. He was last time he had a heated conversation with Tony Katzer, and it was just, they care so much.
Yeah.
It was such a great conversation. And at the end they hugged, and this is how you figure things out.
Yeah, we can't go around just agreeing. I mean, we've all been to every panel where everyone on the panel goes, yep, I agree. That doesn't move this industry forward. It's the discourse that moves it forward.
Okay, I have a couple more questions before we wrap up. Where do you think you will be, or Mediavine or the industry will be in 5 years? And then I want you to ask me the question back, because I have my.
I feel like your question. You've thought about this longer than I have. In 5 years, I think Mediavine will serve an even larger role when it comes to supporting publishers. I think we'll support more types of publishers. I think more publishers will need the likes of Mediavines to be successful.
So potentially the bigger publishers out there who are doing it their own are going to outsource everything.
I think they're already.
I agree.
Yeah, I think they're outsourcing already. I think they're outsourcing in more like different areas, but I think that trend will only continue. I don't foresee the economics of the publisher side being that you can build up a 100-person team if you don't already have them today, and having them today will probably be an area that you'll have to save. I myself, I don't think
still going to be living in Rhode Island.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I know my kids and my husband will be
How old are
living
your
in Rhode
kids?
Island, 14 and 10.
Okay,
They're not going anywhere.
Well, they're going to college soon,
yeah,
I hope,
yeah.
or maybe.
I don't know if I'll always live in Rhode Island, but I think I can't see myself not in ad tech. I really can't. It's addictive. It's always changing. Some of us like to, moan and groan about all the pains and the challenges. I love the pains and challenges. It's why I'm not bored. So I think in 5 years I'm still in the space. I hope that if I'm at Mediavine, it's because we're kicking ass, and if I'm not, I hope it's because some other opportunity has presented itself. But for right now,
you'll meet at one of my square tables.
Yeah. For now, I think I'm going to be fighting the good fight for the sell side.
Okay. So for me, in 5 years, you're more lifestyle, I'm more news and information.
Yes.
Okay.
Where are you going to be?
Well, let me do the news and information first.
Okay.
The news and information, I think, is going to totally reinvent itself the way that news is consumed by users. I think the traditional news publisher with 30, 40, 50, 100, 500 different articles a day goes away. I think it becomes more personalized. I think it depends how I want to consume the data. Do I want something short, medium, long? Do I want it complex? Do I want bullet points? Do I want it emailed to me at 7 a.m? Do I want it a PDF? Do I want to send it to me as a podcast? I think that's all going to evolve, where someone makes a story that's X amount of words, and the machine then reconfigures that into thousands or millions of different iterations depending on how that user wants it consumed. And I think that's going to happen in the next 2, 3, 4 years.
I think it's already happening, yeah.
Right, but I think, and it's going to fundamentally change the way we consume news and information, like when the Facebook news feed was invented. It's going to change so much, we're not going to know what it is.
Yeah, true.
And for me in 5 years, it's my favorite question. I will be retired. Okay, so I think I'm going to wrap it up with Amanda. That was friggin' awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And I'm going to stand up and give you a hug, if
Sounds
that's
great.
okay. And it's so nice having a conversation versus just asking questions. And I think that's it. So we're good to go.